Tonight's big stories. The House Committee on Legislative Franchises investigates SMNI Media Network for allegedly spreading fake news. And its lawyer insists that Apollo Kibuloy is not the owner of the network.
Will the peace talks between government and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines hold up this time? We'll be speaking with Julie De Lima, the negotiating panel chair and widow of Joma Sison, about what they're expecting this time around.
And after all the talk, the speculations, rumors, and questions, it's official. KathNiel have gone their separate ways.
Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Sean Yao. What a packed day.
I guess you guys want to start the news with KathNiel, but we have to get to the hard stories first. So we're going to begin tonight with House lawmakers grilling representatives of Sunshine Media Network International, or SMNI, over their alleged spreading of fake news. SMNI is, of course, the network started by Kingdom of Jesus Christ Pastor Apollo Kibuloy. He used to be former President Duterte's spiritual advisor, but is now on the U.S. FBI's most wanted list for several charges, including sex trafficking, fraud, and smuggling. Now, the subject of today's inquiry is an episode of SMNI's program, Laban Kasama ang Bayan, where one of the anchors raised the question, and I quote verbatim, "May 1.8 billion pesos ba na travel fund ang opisina ni Speaker Martin Romualdez?" So Quezon Representative J.J. Suarez believes the network is launching a smear campaign against the House Speaker. The network's legal officer, Mark Tolentino, defended the program before the House Committee on Legislative Franchises, saying the hosts were merely asking a question and were not making a statement. But lawmakers did not buy this excuse. Listen to this exchange between Representative Suarez and the legal counsel of Suara Sug Media Corporation, which owns SMNI.
It was just a question given not in behalf of SMNI, but it is a statement by an anchor of SMNI. And there is a disclaimer in every program of SMNI that any statement made by the anchor, guest, is not the official stand of SMNI. Second, Mr. Chair, there was no deliberate false information.
A question, attorney, is this. Congressman Joboy, what color is your barong? That is a question. But when you say on live TV, ang speaker ay gumastos ng 1.8 billion pesos sa traveling, hindi lang yun. Baka madagdagan pa yan kung isasama yung entourage. Baka umabot pa ng 2 billion. Umuwi pa ba siya sa bahay? That's not a question, attorney. That is, at the very least, malicious innuendo. At the very least. But from where I'm standing, that is a direct accusation to the House of Representatives.
We cannot dictate on our anchors what questions to ask. They exercise a certain degree of independence.
That disclaimer that the views of the hosts do not reflect that of the networks, the lawmakers didn't buy either. Congressman Suarez brought up Section 4 of RA 11422, which granted the network a franchise to operate. This stated that Suara Sug Media Corporation should not use its stations and facilities for the dissemination of deliberately false information or willful misrepresentation to the detriment of public interests. Suarez then issued this warning to SMNI.
If you can prove that the 1.8 billion pesos is true, I'll resign. But if I can prove that the 1.8 billion that your program said is false, lagay nyo dito yung prangkisa nyo on the line. Payag ka?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Hindi, yes or no?
I cannot answer that, Mr. Chair. I'm just a lawyer, and that's not part of my authority.
It was a very long, quite detailed hearing, I have to say. I listened to parts of it. The other big thing that we found out was that sabi nila ng representatives ng SMNI, that Apollo Kibuloy no longer owns SMNI.
But we all know, Reg, pagdating sa malalaking kumpanya, minsan kasi naka-layer yung ownership. Right? So,
That's a good point.
hindi naman siya parang isang restaurant or isang maliit na tindahan
Oo,
na
na
parang
direct
owned by
ownership.
kunyari, Gretchen Ho or Sean
Correct.
Yao. Diba?
Yes.
Pero ang tawag sa kanya, honorary chairman.
Yun nga.
That's
Ang
right.
bilang block timer.
So they were grilling the executives of SMNI. So they broke down the ownership structure.
Right.
Tapos we found out that majority, or specifically 53.46% is owned by what they call Executive Pastor of Kingdom of Jesus Christ, the name above every name, incorporated. As in yung buong name na yun.
Correct.
It's been
And
trademarked.
that executive pastor of KJC is none other than Pastor Apollo Kibuloy.
Yun na nga. That's where it gets a bit dicey because they were insisting talaga during the hearing that no, he's not the owner of SMNI. And yet, if you start looking into the ownership structure, which they did bring to the hearing,
Let's not
it
also
does lead to
let's also
Kibuloy.
remember, no, SMNI came into prominence during the Duterte administration. They were heavily using the channel. President Duterte has a show, and on that show, his show Gikan sa Masa, on SMNI, that's where he
Releases
supposedly
statements.
releases statements. That's where he quote-unquote attacked the House of Representatives, tas nagkaroon pa ng resolutions. That's where he supposedly threatened the life of Representative Franz Castro as
that's
well.
right.
But do you also remember that President Bongbong Marcos only appeared at the debate hosted by SMNI back during the presidential
Campaign
campaign?
period.
Right. Wala
That's
siyang
right.
pinuntahang iba pang debate.
Because
except
they endorsed the Duterte-Marcos tandem.
Unit team,
Oh,
yes.
unit team sila
Oo.
ngayon. But now, it seems like the tables are turning. Question is, I mean, various groups have raised concerns with SMNI's broadcast. So some have been red tagging, some concerns over their newscasts. The question is, why only now are the congressmen
Good point,
raising
diba? Timing
all
is
of
everything.
these issues when the speaker has been hit?
But also, you're right that the tides have turned because remember this year alone, the giant social media channels, Google in particular, have shut down SMNI and Kibuloy,
Yes.
the
You're right.
two channels.
Right. In July,
June-
they took down SMNI's YouTube channel.
Correct.
And there is no Facebook page for SMNI. There's only a Facebook page for former President Duterte's show, SMNI Gikan sa Masa para sa Masa.
Oh, that's a bit curious because I'm sure they derive a big chunk of their revenue as well
At sabi
from
rin
social media.
Sabi rin ng KBP, the SMNI anchors are not accredited broadcasters. They revealed that SMNI has not subjected any of its anchors to seminars on responsible broadcasting, which is a requirement for accreditation of broadcast journalists. KBP Vice President for Legal and Regulatory Compliance Group Rudolph Hularbal disclosed that SMNI violated the rule of KBP, which requires all broadcasters of its member networks to undergo a seminar on the broadcast code of the Philippines. But I'm wondering how liable is a network for the statements of its anchors?
I think this is
how far
exactly
does
what
that
we want to find out.
Teka lang, I got worried there. Have I undergone that seminar?
Ah, diba?
But in
I
any
did,
case,
pero matagal na.
Oo.
Tapos
Parang
meron siyang
nagsisimula
binigay
yeah,
na
matagal na.
thick copy of
broadcast
ethics
code.
and rules.
That's right.
As a
Right.
drawer ko
Ayun,
pa rin
binigyan din ako
ngayon.
nun.
Di ba?
I think you can make that argument either way. How liable a network is
But-
over what an anchor say,
I wonder
right?
what
over what we
constitutes
say. But we have to be
as-
careful. That's why we're extra careful.
But there's also libel, di ba? Parang until when you say that, this merits not renewing a franchise or revoking a franchise, or dalhin lang natin sa korte, libel nila.
But
Medyo
in
iba
any
rin to
case,
dun sa case ng ABS-CBN because a lot of people were saying, ito na, come upons revenge.
Right.
It's not because we all know, of course, all of these leave a bad taste in our mouths when we're talking about media freedom and all of that. But yung franchise kasi ng ABS-CBN was lapsing and it was not renewed. But this is like one
Right.
level higher.
Right.
Because
No, but-
their franchise is until
But we're not there yet. We're not there. We're not there yet at the
Kakarenew lang
point
kasi nung
where
2018.
we're not there at the point where we're talking about revoking the franchise. This is just an investigation into that claim over the speaker's travel fund, whether it's true or not. And some of the questions that were raised during the hearing were on point naman about, how it goes into very deep detail about how we get our stories, how we
The
source our
sources.
stories, whether our sources
Facts.
are unimpeachable. It goes to the very heart of these questions, which I think is it's worth
So
conversation.
I guess bakit ngayon lang din natin
But the other thing that's been trending is, of course, former spokesperson Harry Roque,
The
who
video,
himself
yes.
has a show on SMNI, and of course he's trending because people are. Let's just
Gusto niyo bang basahin ko?
Sige, go.
Ito, statement niya. Muli sa ating mga kasamahan sa media, meron na naman pong banta sa malayang pamamahayag sa pamamagitan ng pananakot na baka ma-revoke ang prangkisa ng SMNI. Itong kalayaan po ng mamamahayag ay napaka-importanting kalayaan para po magkaroon ng demokrasya dahil kailangan pangalagaan natin ang malayang merkado ng ideya. Now, back in 2020, he was saying about ABS-CBN na, wala ng ABS-CBN station. Filipinos can now turn to government news channels, move on, the fight is over. Sinabi rin niya that barring reporters from the palace briefings is not a press freedom issue.
All I can say is that is not the first time former spokes Harry Roque has flip-flopped on an issue. Very clear in my mind still his stance on the West Philippine Sea. So we'll leave it at that.
Alright, punta naman tayo, no? Kanina pa natin binibring up itong source. Now, SMNI anchor Eric Celis says that he had two sources regarding the alleged 1.8 billion peso travel fund of the House Speaker, Martin Romualdez. One is someone who anonymously sent him a message via an unverified number claiming that he is a Senate employee, while the other source is supposedly a former member of the New People's Army. Now, Celis refused to name these individuals, saying he is trying to protect his sources.
Pwede niyo bang sabihin kung tiga saan yung staff?
Minimum requirement of giving government employee po siya, nasa Senate. And upon consultation po sa ilang mga provision na tinitingnan ko dito sa batas that will cover the protection of the source, I will refer to the SOTO law protection.
Now, the House Secretary General, Reginald Velasco, has also debunked the 1.8 billion peso travel expense claim, saying that Speaker Romualdez only spent some 4.3 billion pesos for his travels from January to October. Congressmen and the entire Secretariat, meanwhile, used up over 35 million pesos in total for official travels.
Si Eric Celis din yung na-call out ng CHR noon for red tagging certain individuals, linking them to the CPP-NPA, and even saying that PhilStar is an affiliate of CPP-NPA. So actually, medyo controversial tong si Eric.
Oo, tsaka nagka-crop up siya, especially sa lahat ng mga big issues of today. Parang his name has appeared multiple times.
Let's move on.
Ito naman, wala nang balikan ng confidential funds sa OVP at DepEd. That is the stand of senators at the beginning of the Bicameral Conference Committee for the proposed 2024 national budget. The Bicameral Conference Committee for the 5.768 trillion pesos proposed budget for next year started earlier today. There, 15 senators and 12 congressmen discussed the respective provisions to reconcile their versions of the proposed national budget. Now, during the hearing, the Senate asserted that they will no longer return the confidential and intelligence funds of some civilian agencies. Now, among these are the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education, both of which are under the leadership of Vice President Sara Duterte. In total, about 1.23 billion pesos worth of confidential and intelligence funds has been transferred to agencies related to national security.
By and large, in-adapt namin yung ginawa ng House, yung ni-realign nila to the security agencies. We shared their view na doon talaga dapat sa mga intelligence gatherers and providers.
Ayun nga, sabi rin nga ni Senator Sonny Angara, the proposal to reduce the Office of the President's 4.38 billion peso budget was no longer discussed in full given all the challenges that the current administration needs to still address. So, usually naman walang umaalma sa budget ng OP. Yung iba lang.
But of course, it wasn't just the OP and DepEd's confidential funds that were removed in the 2024 national budget. What about the other agencies? Let's find out from our mobile journalist, Francis Orcio. Francis, what do you have for us?
Reg, that's right. Aside from what was mentioned earlier, discussions were also held regarding the possibility of returning the requested 300 million pesos confidential fund to the DICT. The agency is appealing to have their confidential funds reinstated due to the threat of security attacks in the country. This is especially crucial as there has been a series of hacking incidents on government websites and systems in recent months. In contrast to the OVP and DepEd, some senators agree with this proposal.
Napakamahal ang pagbili ng mga software or hardware para dyan. At kung bibili ka ngayon, next year, outmoded na yan. Kasi yung mga hacker, mabilis yan mag-upgrade. Kung hindi natin suportahan ng DICT, kawawa ang Pilipino, maraming mabibiktima dito sa cybercrimes.
Aside from this, the Senate contingent will also push for an increase in the budget for the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard.
Because of the West Philippine Sea issue, we have to beef up, strengthen our naval assets as well. Hindi purposely para tapatan ng China, kinakailangan natin because of the situation. We have to protect our territorial integrity.
On the other hand, the House contingent plans to focus attention on the budget for social services.
We want to fight the inflation, yung inflation sa bigas, sa yung mga ayuda, no, social services, para naman baka mamaya madagdagan pa yung problema sa mga gera or sa inflation. Kailangan medyo handa tayo.
Reg, the Congress aims to ratify the proposed 2024 national budget by the second week of December. Then they plan to submit the final copy for the signature of President Bongbong Marcos. Reg?
Thanks for that update. Mobile journalist Francis Orcio.
Up next, new peace negotiations between the government and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines are underway. Will this finally end the decades-old conflict? We'll be speaking with NDFP negotiating panel chairperson Julie De Lima when the big story returns. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Right, next big story and big question for today. Will the decades-old quest for peace between the government and communist rebels finally be settled by the Marcos Jr. administration? Now, that is a question many are hoping to find the answer to after both parties agreed to resume peace talks this week. And joining us tonight to talk about this is Julie De Lima, chairperson of the National Democratic Front's negotiating panel. Julie, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm guessing that you were not as surprised as the rest of us to hear about this development. Can you walk us through paano to nagyari and how long has this been in the works?
Good evening to you in Manila.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear us?
This new initiative towards resuming the peace negotiations was initiated by uh, uh, Brigadier General Emmanuel Bautista, who approached us through the Royal Norwegian government during the time of President Duterte. This was in the first quarter of 2022. And then, of course, since the NDFP is always open to peace negotiations, we responded. General Bautista said he was doing the approach in his personal capacity. So, and later on, when the new president took office, he was able to get the blessings of the president, and thus discussions were conducted until we signed.
The joint statement was signed just
drafted,
the other day, right?
Until we drafted the communique, the joint statement, which was in the communique that was released.
All right, so you just to clarify, this started in the first quarter of 2022, meaning it's still under the Duterte administration, because we all assumed, Julie, that it was dead in the water since 2017 after the initial peace talks kind of like just died.
Yes, that was why Brigadier General Bautista said that he was making the approach in his personal capacity. It was not with the blessing of the former president.
All right. Ms. De Lima, Presidential Advisor on Peace, Carlito Galvez, said this is not a quote-unquote resumption of talks. He said this is a quote from the start negotiations. What exactly does that mean? Does it mean like everything that you've agreed on in the past you're throwing out? Clean slate talaga to?
No, I think, we'll let us not quarrel about the terminology. We will not quarrel with them over the terminology. They can use a restart of the peace negotiations, but we will keep on using the term. It is a resumption of the peace negotiations that has been going on since the time of Mrs. Aquino. And so, that is just so that we will keep on talking. We will have to discuss this face to face.
Okay, Ms. Julie, Presidential Advisor Carlito Galvez also had good things to say after the joint communique signing. Let's listen into that and let's get your thoughts.
Nakikita ko the president is very positive. Even the other party, they're very confident. Even napaka-cordial. Actually, maganda yung our experience with Austrians. We are very happy, and even sometimes naging emotional yung the other party.
Okay, just circling back po dun sa naging timeline po with the past administration. Binuhay po ni Presidente Duterte yung negotiations in 2016, in 2017 sinabi niya na mukhang hindi kaya mag-negotiate, terminate niya po yun. And then na-designate po kayo na terrorist in 2021. Dito po, why the optimism with this current administration and the confidence?
Well, we are guardedly optimistic that indeed the president is willing to resume the peace negotiations. The fact that he has sent officials, his high officials, to sign the joint communique and the joint statement. That gives us some measure of confidence that the president is willing to pursue the peace negotiations.
But what would you, but
we
why
were
did
first-
why,
Again?
why po were was there a deterioration of the talks back then, and what would you like to change in the way that your group is communicating with the government this time around?
Yeah, it was because then President Duterte, after first welcoming the peace negotiation and saying that he was a socialist, started to put roadblocks to the peace negotiations. And then, of course, and finally terminated it by issuing
Ano pong roadblocks yun, Miss Julie?
well, these roadblocks were not even meeting the negotiating panel to report on what transpired during the peace negotiations. So when we were discussing the draft of the reciprocal agreement on the social and economic reforms, we had a lot of difficulties because President Duterte, when we had reached some agreement on agrarian reform, he stopped the negotiations.
All right, Julie, there were also certain issues that you yourself have talked about, and these are the certain issues that you would like to see addressed before you go to the negotiating table. These are, of course, the participation of the NDFP consultants in the peace process. Second is the assurance of safety and immunity for those involved in negotiations, and the general, unconditional, and omnibus release of all political prisoners. There is also one about removing the terrorist label on your group. Are these still in play? Are you still going to insist that these conditions are followed through before you proceed, or are you changing your mind?
No, we're not changing our mind. These are issues to be discussed in order to enhance the peace, the continuance of the peace negotiations. These are not conditions. So these issues are on the table, and they will be discussed when we meet.
All right.
What specifically would you be willing to compromise on out of all these issues that we just laid out? If there's anyone that you would be willing to meet the government middle ground on, what would it be?
Well, of course, we will insist until all these until all these issues are resolved. We will continue discussing.
All right. Julie, right before Joma Sison died, you said right after he died, rather, you said some 15 or so minutes before Joma took his last breath, he was still talking about ensuring the revolution would win victory and advancing to socialism. It kind of runs counter to, having peace talks or restarting peace talks. So where does your group, where does the NDFP lie really on this issue? As we know, since then, a lot of other leaders have been neutralized. There was Benito and Will Matiamzon, of course, and some of the other leaders have also passed away. And how have these changed the group dynamics, or have they at all?
Well, what Joma said, peace negotiations has the same objective as the armed struggle. It is to achieve a just and lasting peace for the Filipino people. So we will be talking with the government for as long as it has the political will to that runs in the same line with us. That is to end the armed conflict and build a just and lasting peace. So it is a just and lasting peace that we want. And if it has to be done through the armed struggle, it will be done through the armed struggle. But if we can lessen the sacrifices of both the soldiers of the government and the New People's Army, then we will continue to pursue the peace negotiations for as long as the government of the Philippines is willing.
Would this perhaps start with a ceasefire this Christmas? Traditionally, we have that. For this year, it's already December tomorrow and no ceasefire has yet to be announced. Would you be knowledgeable kung matutuloy po ba or may nakausap na kayo sa gobyerno about a possible ceasefire for the holidays?
No, I have no idea whether there will be ceasefire. But insofar as what I've already heard from some of the pronouncements of government officials and the military, there will be no ceasefire on their part. So,
What about on your end? Could this perhaps be initiated from the NDFP?
well, it is something to be discussed by the revolutionary forces, whether there will be a ceasefire or whether there will not be a ceasefire.
So it's still possible at this point in time?
It's still possible.
All right, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the Netherlands, NDFP negotiating panel chairperson, Julie De Lima.
We're going to pause for a quick one right now, but right after that, well, it's confirmed.
Time to break hearts.
Celebrity power couple Kathryn Bernardo and Daniel Padilla have parted ways. The details about this so-called closed chapter. When the big story returns, keep it here.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
There appears to be a crucial development in the hostage situation involving 17 Filipino seafarers in the Red Sea. We don't exactly know yet, but it's big enough for President Bongbong Marcos to skip the COP28 climate summit in Dubai. The president made a last-minute decision to cancel his trip in light of important developments on the hostage situation. His economic team, though, were all present at Villamor Air Base in Pasay, along with other members of the COP28 delegation. The Foreign Affairs Department earlier said that the Pinoy seafarers are all well and that they might be released soon. Meanwhile, there's no word yet on what exact matter President Marcos had to attend to, other than it involves sensitive issues.
Anything that will be involving our seafarers ay napaka-importante para sa ating Pangulo. Pero at this point, sana maunawaan nyo, hindi ko pwedeng i-discuss kung ano nangyayari because of the sensitive issues.
I was watching the entire video plus different angles of this ambush interview with DILG Secretary Benhur Abalos, and he really refused to answer. He says, "I don't know."
Fair enough.
It's fair enough.
National security matters,
Yes.
right? So
but
now,
he did say it had something to do with the 17 Filipino seafarers.
But
maybe
now,
there's
because
negotiations.
the president is not there, the ENR Secretary Tony Yulo Loizaga is leading the Philippine COP28 delegation. And speaking of travel budget, the DENR Secretary rather, is recently in hot water over alleged extravagant travels and corruption. Ang tawag nga sa kanya ni Senator Raffy Tulfo, a jet setter daw.
I remember she was. It was raised in a hearing then, committee hearing.
It was her budget,
by Senator
her
Tulfo.
DNR's budget hearing. But of course, as we know, I think President Bongbong Marcos really wanted to go to Dubai because he always mentions climate change and how important it is to him and how important it is for the Philippines to start addressing these issues. Yes, it is. I agree with him 100%.
One of the most at-risk worldwide in terms of climate disasters. We know this. So, of
That's
course,
why
we
I
gotta
guess,
have a seat at the table.
Senator Tulfo has been wanting more of the budget to go into implementation in the country. That's what he was talking about in the hearing.
Well, I suppose we'll find out in the days to come. There's still one more working day tomorrow to find out maybe why the president decided to stay.
Well, regardless, I think the larger point for me is I hope we get something out of COP28, right? It's being represented by a lot of global leaders. So Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries at
Pero ang
at
depensa
risk.
naman ng DENR, nagagamit naman daw nila yung mga natututunan nila dun sa mga summit na yon, and they implement it in their programs.
And you know how it goes with these dialogues, these high-level dialogues. Having a seat at that table and being to state your piece is
It's
everything.
a big thing.
It's everything, right? Okay, moving on now to other stories.
Yes,
because climate
more
change is
issues.
my issue. Smartmatic has hit back at
the
COMELEC for disqualifying them from future elections, saying this was, quote, unfair. Mon Gualvez has the details.
As part of the commemoration of Gat Andres Bonifacio's birthday, the group led by former DICT Undersecretary Eliseo Rio Jr. simultaneously tore pieces of paper in front of the COMELEC office in Manila. But unlike Bonifacio's act, Rio's group tore and burned sample ballots and not cedulas. While they are happy about the disqualification of Smartmatic, they claim that it was not based on the petitions filed by Rio.
Yung pinagbasihan nila ay matagal ng eleksyon, issue, no? 2016 pa. Hindi nila tinignan mabuti yung mga irregularidad nitong 2022 election, Mayo 9, no? So yun ang aming kulang pa.
For their part, the COMELEC has issued a clarification on this matter. In the poll body's initial resolution, it was revealed that former COMELEC chairman Andres Bautista allegedly established a foreign shell company. This purportedly received bribes from the Smartmatic to select them as the supplier of vote counting machines during the 2016 elections. Although not yet proven, the COMELEC emphasized that the issue involving Bautista and Smartmatic is a significant blow to the integrity of the elections.
And the COMELEC cannot close its eyes to the reality that there are several issues pertaining to the integrity and credibility of this company. And therefore, kung pababayaan po namin yan, mas maki-question po kasi yung integrity ng buong proseso.
In response to this, Smartmatic has released a statement expressing its disappointment and describing the disqualification as a surprise. The company also clarified that they are not facing any formal charges in the United States. They added that a false accusation and more so a disqualification on the basis of a non-existent grounds is not only legally and morally wrong but plain unfair. Aside from that, the company said that if there was indeed a pending investigation and indictment, the COMELEC is expected to abide by the constitutional tenet of a presumption of innocence. They added that it is foundational to any legal system that investigations or indictments do not automatically amount to guilt, nor does it affirm one's innocence. However, according to Garcia, the COMELEC can immediately disqualify using their administrative function.
Kapag administrative function, we can act based on something which we are fully aware of. Not necessarily because it is contained in any petition or whatever.
Despite the issues on hand, the COMELEC maintained that the bidding will proceed on December 12 for the next service provider of the agency. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
Now here is our heartbreaker for tonight, our big story from showbiz. Chapter close. In two simple words, Catherine Bernardo ended all the rumors, talk, and questions about her and her real-life partner, Daniel Padilla. In her Instagram post, Catherine said, "I hope this finally helps all of us move forward. I won't be entertaining questions regarding this anymore. Thank you for understanding." She ends her caption with a praying emoji. Now she penned a long message to their fans, part of which read, "Like any other relationship, we tried our best to make it work. We've been drifting apart for a while now, and we ultimately had to accept that we can't go back to where we used to be, and it just won't be fair to pretend that everything is still the same. These past few months have been tough, but thank you for giving us the time we need to process the pain and finally face the elephant in the room. Our love story began with respect and ended with respect." Kathryn addressed their fan base, KathNiel, saying, "We know you are hurting, and trust me, this also hurts us both more than you can imagine. The last thing we want is for this family to break apart with everyone taking sides. Please don't. Deej and I will continue to support each other as we try to heal and move forward from this." She ended her post with a short message to Daniel. Kathryn said, "Deej, you gave me 11 beautiful years and the kind of love that I will forever cherish. I will always be grateful for you."
Pero teka ha, nag-post na rin ang other half of the KathNiel love team na si Daniel Padilla. Daniel posted this photo of him and Kath with the caption, "Ikaw at ako." Daniel also posted this message, which started with what appears to be a poem for Kathryn. The end line goes, "Our lives may drift away, but our love will still ride that tide." He also thanked KathNiels for their support, telling them, "Magiging mahirap pero kailangan nating yakapin ang kinabukasan." Daniel also addressed Kathryn, saying, "Bal, ang pagmamahal ko sa iyo ay walang hanggan at walang katapusan." Well,
malungkot ang sambayan ng Pilipino
Sobra.
sa balitang ito. Kanina tinitignan ko yung isang website na nag-break ng news. 650,000 shares in 2 hours.
Wow.
Balita ko pati Viber daw ay sumasabog
We
na.
were having this
Sumasabog na
conversation as well. I don't know them very well. But I just wanted to say, yung statement ni Kathryn was, it sounds very mature, huh?
It is. It talks about growth, about drifting apart,
that is
being grateful.
That is an incredibly mature way to deal with this.
I think that's exactly why people love this couple so much. Because, di ba, wala kang naririnig na kung ano-ano, unlike others.
Napamahal na sa kanila kasi ang dami na ng movies na ginawa together. And sobrang, I feel like we live through them, the Filipino love story. So that's why super lakas nitong dalawa. But also, there was a point when Kathryn had to do movies on her own with different partners.
Leading men.
To grow.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she was talking about when she said they drifted apart already. Ayun nga, no? So, malungkot talaga yan, no?
Every single breakup is hard. Lalo na kung nasa kalagitnaan ka ng limelight. I can imagine, it's hard enough when nobody
11 years
Are you still
with
talking
someone.
about KathNiel or someone
Pero,
else here?
hindi, ang problema kasi parang may umuugong din na third-party rumors dito.
okay.
So that's the other side of the story. But then, at the end of the day, it's also ang punot dulo. Ano bang punot dulo nung third party kung totoo man yun, di ba? Baka kasi drift apart na rin sila.
Hindi naman natin alam yung timing eh. I mean, the statements came out today, but they could have agreed to end it before tonight. So, huwag na natin silang pagchismisan, di ba? Mag-commercial lang muna
No, but I
tayo.
like that they ended it maturely.
Yeah, that's
Very
what I'm saying. That
respectful.
statement
And they
is
respected
incredibly
their
respectful.
fans enough to give them closure also over this chapter.
Alright.
So, malungkot tayo.
Malungkot tayo, pero commercial muna tayo. Right after that, just one day after rolling out its 20 peso a kilo rice initiative, the Cebu provincial government had to scrap it suddenly. Find out why when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Welcome back. You're still watching Big Story here in One News.
Just 2 days after launching their 20 peso a kilo rice, the Cebu provincial government has now suspended the program. The provincial government said it needs to finalize the list of indigent beneficiaries after they found duplicates. The subsidized rice program was launched just this Tuesday and was even lauded as revolutionary by none other than House Speaker Martin Romualdez, who was also present at the launch. There have been concerns, though, on whether the initiative can be sustained in the long run. Ang bilis naman magbago.
Isang araw.
Speaking of changes, you know.
It's an issue. It was always a
Diba?
question of sustainability.
Totoo naman,
Kasi
totoo
may,
naman.
yung beneficiaries list, I guess, was bigger than they had anticipated. We talked to
The provincial agriculturist, no, si Dr. Roldan Sarajena. And he was saying na nanggagaling sa budget nila and kaya daw i-sustain yung program. Although, I doubt nga no, that he was the one thinking about the finance aspect of that program. So, it wasn't made clear to me rin no, kung sa NFA ba galing yung tulong dapat.
Let's roll the soundbite from Sarajena.
Actually, it's of a good quality, even better from the rice in the market today, because it's a new harvest, and according to NFA, they source their rice stock from our local farmers here in the Philippines, like in northern Luzon. We hope that we can sustain this in the long run. We have an initial meetings already. We conducted meetings already with the NFA people here in Cebu. And for now, meron pa naman silang ng stocks na maibigay. Yung tinitingnan ni Governor Gwen kung in the future baka kukulangin na.
Unfortunately, on the other side of it, yung other industry stakeholders have pointed out that NFA rice is technically reserved for disasters and emergencies, which is why they question the use of it at this point in time. Actually, we also have that soundbite. Let's try to roll it.
Napakaliit po ng ating reserve stock na hawak po ng NFA. Ayun, kung lalabas pa yung tulong nila sa province of Cebu for its rice subsidy program, baka pagdating po ng El Nino, ibang bagyo later on, hirap na ngayon ng NFA na makapag-provide po ng relief goods, relief rice sa DSWD. So that will be a big problem down the road.
On top of that, sabi rin ng Agriculture Department that local well-milled rice, tumaas din yung presyo because nagsimula na mag-kick in ang holiday demand. So,
yes, of
mula
course.
45 pesos per kilo, it's now at 52 pesos per kilo. Pati nga yung Kadiwa stores, no, that used to sell rice for 38 pesos per kilo, wala pa ring update kung matutuloy pa.
Analysts are also predicting, I was looking at the headline a while ago, that rice may reach its 15-year high because of unexpected demand in Asia. Also coming from our end here in the Philippines.
Because nga of the El Nino.
I mean, just putting that side by side, paano nagagawa yung 20 pesos na yun, and rice is still going up.
We'll
the
see.
Prices, right?
We'll see if they continue.
We'll see and we will pray, but here we go. Meron pa po. Before we go, our big picture tonight is none other than ta-da! Gretchen, flexing her cycling chops at the request and insistence of myself and Regina. So, in case you missed
Kasi
it,
naman.
yes, November 30 po today. Normally, Bonifacio Day ito. Pero, dinagdagan pa ni President Marcos ng he declared the last working day of November as National Bike to Work Day kasi nga naurong na yung holiday nung Monday. So Proclamation 409 aims to raise public awareness on cycling as a mainstream mode of transportation and improving the cycling infrastructure here in the country. So, we tasked Gretchen because takot kami ni Regina. Siya malakas loob.
Mag-bike on the open road.
Okay,
Yes.
so
how was it?
took on the journey of a condominium here, living here near TV5. So I rode my bike. Can you roll the video? Okay, so I tried to do that rush hour, mga ano na yan, 5 p.m. yan. So okay naman, no? Ito yung sa may TV5 vicinity kasi ang daming condo dyan. Pero it seems like I was with nobody. There was nobody biking to work with me. Pangalawa, parang hindi masyadong respectful yung mga motorcycles, the cars and the tricycles.
I can't even look.
And some lanes had markings but there were no bike lanes dito yan sa Mandaluyong. At hindi lang yan, no, muntik pa akong masagasaan kanina.
Ilang beses?
Ng tricycle at saka nadaanan ako ng ito yan, muntik na. Yun na nga, so I think yun yung while it already is a win for the cycling community to have a National Bike to Work Day, my question is, why was it declared just yesterday? Feels like nobody knows about it. That's number one. Number two, I think it's a superficial win because we need to improve on
the infrastructure.
Yes, infrastructure. That's number one, right? And how do we do this safely on a day-to-day basis if I can't even get through the rush hour?
I think if you step back and look at it from a larger perspective, the whole road and commuting network needs to be addressed. We can't look at it just from okay, lagay niyo yung mga bikers dyan, lagay mo yung mga motor. Hindi pwedeng ganun eh.
Hindi mo pwede sabihin, tara mag-bike tayo.
Oo.
Kasi
tingnan nyo
hindi
naman.
naman yun ang problema. Ang problema is, takot yung mga tao mag-bike dahil delikado. At bakit delikado? Kasi walang espasyo. Pero there's also a struggle between the motorcycles and the bikes over the small bike lane and who should get priority.
Diba? There's that question.
And the traffic also, so it really is very difficult
to implement. The intent is good though.
Yes, yun.
Yes.
Tama yun.
The intent is,
Agree.
okay, let's designate a day where many of us will try to bike to work, thereby
it is
saving
a good start.
on emissions.
It is a good start. Like
Pero
to
mahirap
have,
kasi na
the DOH on board, the DOTR on board on
MMDA.
this, the President on board on this, but how it translates to budget and infrastructure.
And implementation.
is a question.
I mean, if you're gonna have just one day, siguro dapat na-inform lahat, no? At saka bawasan natin yung cars.
Kaya
Kasi
nga
sobrang delikado siya. Looking at that video, Gretch, ang lapit lang nung binayik mo.
I would look forward to what's going to happen next year when everybody has had more time to prepare for National Bike Day,
Maybe
not just a
next
day.
year the president can bike to Malacanang, right?
Oh, that was a
great initiative, right? That would make a strong statement.
All right, while we wait for next year's National Bike to Work Day, that's it for the show tonight.
I guess we'll be seeing all the memes about KathNiel now. We'll leave you to that. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.